Apple Podcast title, The Deep Dive. Jeff Dexter, The Mod Scene and the Birth of DJ Culture. Apple Podcast description. Uncover the untold story of Jeff Dexter, the legendary British DJ, club promoter, and record producer who defined the 1960s London mod scene. In this deep dive, we explore how a tailoring-obsessed teenager from Elephant and Castle popularized the twist in England, danced his way into London's most exclusive clubs, and shaped music history. From spinning records at the first 1971 Glastonbury Fair to launching the chart-topping rock band America and befriending a young Marc Bolan, discover the roots of DJing and the cultural shifts that forever changed the UK music industry. Perfect for music history buffs, mod culture enthusiasts, and anyone fascinated by 1960s London nightlife.
Welcome to our deep dive. If you were looking at the title and description for today's session before you hit play, you probably saw our focus.
Right.
We're unraveling the incredible, somewhat hidden history of Jeff Dexter.
Yeah, the mod scene, the birth of DJ culture.
Exactly. And today, we're pulling our source material straight from the Wikipedia article on Jeff Dexter.
Who was born Jeffery Dexter Bedwell, just for the record.
Right, Jeffrey Dexter Bedwell. And our mission today is to really explore how sheer audacity, borderline obsessive love for fashion, and this incredible youth culture hustle transformed a kid from South London into a linchpin of the 1960s underground.
And eventually a massive music industry heavyweight.
Oh, absolutely. Okay, let's unpack this because we are talking about a guy who spun records at the very first Glastonbury Fair.
Yep.
Who literally introduced the twist to England.
Which is a crazy story on its own.
Right, and who helped launch the global hit band America. But he started with absolutely nothing but a needle, thread, and a whole lot of confidence.
It is a staggering trajectory, to say the least. And what we were going to see as we look at Dexter's life is that this isn't just, a standard music biography.
Like where someone just picks up a guitar and gets famous.
Exactly. It is essentially a masterclass in how underground youth culture bubbles up from the streets.
From the very bottom.
Right. Specifically, the working-class neighborhoods of post-war London. And how that dictates global mainstream tastes.
Yeah.
You are going to see how the margins continually redefine the center. It's a story of post-war Britain, the actual birth of the teenager as a distinct consumer class.
Which didn't even exist before then.
No, it really didn't. And it's about the sheer power of pretending you belong until you actually do.
I want to stop you right there and look at that starting point because context is everything here.
Absolutely.
So Jeff Dexter was born on August 15th, 1946.
In Lambeth Hospital.
Right, Lambeth Hospital. And he was raised in Newington Butts, which is near Elephant and Castle in London.
Yeah.
And then he moved to Camberwell Road when he was 10. No, this is 1946.
We really have to picture that area at the time.
Oh, yeah. We are talking about a London that is literally still smoldering from the Blitz.
It's gray. It's heavily rationed.
Economically devastated.
Mm-hmm.
So how does a kid in that specific environment even begin to connect with global music and fashion?
That is the exact right question to ask, because you have to look at the physical landscape. Elephant and Castle in the late 1940s and early 1950s was defined by bomb craters and austerity.
Just total survival mode.
Yes. Food rationing in the UK didn't entirely end until 1954.
Wow, 1954.
So the concept of disposable income or leisure time?
Or buying things simply for pleasure.
Right. It was an incredibly foreign concept to working-class families trying to rebuild their lives.
Which makes this first detail from the source so fascinating.
The record.
Yes, the record. The text notes that Dexter bought his first record in 1955 or 1956, so he's just 9 or 10 years old.
Just a little kid.
And the record was a 78 RPM of 16 tons by Tennessee Ernie Ford. But here is the massive catch.
His family did not own a gramophone.
They didn't have one, so he had to physically take this record and visit his friends' houses just to listen to it.
It's incredible.
Why buy a record if you literally cannot play it? For you listening, it's like buying a video game today without owning the console, just to carry it over to a friend's house.
What's fascinating here is the profound level of dedication required to be a music fan in mid-1950s working-class London.
Yeah, tell us about those 78s.
A 78 RPM record in 1955 wasn't just a piece of plastic. It was made of shellac.
Which is heavy.
It was heavy, and it was incredibly brittle. I mean, if you dropped it, it shattered into a dozen pieces on the pavement.
Oh, man. No streaming, no downloading.
Not at all. It wasn't something you could easily stream or slip into a pocket. Buying a physical medium without the hardware to play it signifies a deep, almost primal commitment to the very idea of music.
And the idea of ownership?
Exactly. Ownership. He wanted a piece of that cultural capital for himself, even if he couldn't access it independently.
And 16 tons is a very specific choice for a 10-year-old in London.
It really is.
I mean, it's an American country and Western song about the absolute misery of coal mining and being hopelessly in debt to the company store. What is a kid in Camberwell Road doing with that?
It speaks to the rhythm and the attitude of the American import. Post-war British youth were captivated by America. America represented technicolor, wealth, and rebellion.
While Britain represented grayscale rationing.
Perfectly said. Even though the song is about mining in Kentucky, the driving, snapping beat and the deep, booming voice of Tennessee, Ernie Ford, would have sounded like something from another planet to a kid in London.
Like an alien transmission.
Yeah, but look at the practical reality of what he did. By not having a gramophone, that early barrier to entry actually forged a communal listening experience.
Because he couldn't sit alone in his bedroom?
He was forced to go out, to visit friends, to share the music. This inadvertently trained him for his future career.
Are you saying he was basically organizing listening parties at 10 years old?
Exactly. From the age of 10, he was already gathering people around a record player.
Wow.
He was already creating an event around a piece of music, which is the foundational core of what a DJ does. He was curating an experience.
Acting as the bridge between the music and the audience.
Purely out of necessity.
That makes a lot of sense.
Mm-hmm.
He was a DJ before he even knew what the concept was. But music was only half of the equation for Dexter, right?
Right. There was the fashion.
The source tells us his other major obsession was fashion. He had an early interest in clothing and style, influenced heavily by his mother and his brother.
Which leads to a very interesting tactical move on his part.
Yes, as a boy, he joined the Sea Scouts and the Boys Brigade. Now, you'd assume a kid joins those for the camping or the sailing.
For the discipline.
Right. But he explicitly stated he joined specifically because he wanted to wear the uniforms.
This is a critical piece of the puzzle regarding youth culture and social mobility.
How so?
Well, if we look at the intersection of fashion, identity, and rebellion in post-war Britain, it's entirely rooted in self-presentation.
Okay.
For you listening, you have to understand that the teenager as a demographic didn't really exist before this era.
Right. Before the 1950s, you were a child.
And then you went to work and became an adult.
Dressing in miniature versions of your parents' drab clothing.
Precisely.
Yeah.
The 1950s birthed this new transitional phase where young people suddenly had a little bit of pocket money.
And a desire to visually separate themselves from the older generation.
Right.
So the uniform was his way of participating in that visual separation. Even though a Boys Brigade uniform is, by definition, meant to enforce conformity.
It's a paradox, but a brilliant one. For a young Jeff Dexter, a uniform wasn't about conforming to a military or religious ideal.
Which was the intended purpose of those organizations.
Right. It was an accessible way to engage with structured style. It was a way to look the part when you couldn't afford expensive tailored clothes.
Oh, I see. A uniform has clean lines.
It has brass buttons. It demands maintenance and pride. He was essentially borrowing the prestige of a uniform to elevate his own status in a neighborhood where most kids were wearing hand-me-downs.
That is so smart. And he didn't stop at just wearing clothes. He wanted to understand how they were built.
He went all in.
He actually took up dressmaking and tailoring. Now, he noted that he was often the only boy in these settings, surrounded by girls and women learning how to sew.
Which is a huge detail.
I have to push back here on the reality of 1950s South London. Sewing and tailoring for a young boy in a rough working-class neighborhood.
Yeah.
Was there no pushback or bullying for doing what was strictly considered women's work at the time? It seems like a massive social risk.
It was an enormous social risk.
Wow.
The gender dynamics of working-class London in the 1950s were incredibly rigid.
Boys were expected to play football.
Get into scraps, prepare for manual labor.
Right.
Taking a needle and thread and sitting in a dressmaking class was subverting every expectation of working-class masculinity.
But he did it anyway.
Because Dexter was a pragmatist, he recognized early on that understanding clothes, understanding how a garment is constructed, gave him access.
Access to what?
It gave him access to a unique skill that none of his male peers had, but more importantly, to a teenage boy, it gave him access to girls.
The source actually points that out explicitly. It says this unique skill set made him highly popular with the girls, a fact that he thoroughly enjoyed.
Yes, he did.
He basically bypassed the traditional macho posturing of his neighborhood to get a social edge.
Precisely. He was playing chess while everyone else is playing checkers.
I love that.
He realized that if he controlled the fashion, If he could alter a dress or hem a skirt for a girl, he had an in that no other boy had.
He was building social capital through aesthetics.
And this understanding of how a dart works, how a lapel should sit, how fabric drapes, this becomes his ultimate weapon.
Which brings us to what might be the most cinematic moment in this entire deep dive.
The club infiltration.
His infiltration of the Lyceum Club. The audacity here is just off the charts.
Yeah.
It's August 1961. Dexter is just 14 years old.
14.
Some older girls he knows invite him to go to the Lyceum, which was a massive, iconic venue in London.
Huge place.
But there's a huge physical barrier here. He's only 4 foot 8.5 inches tall. He readily admits he looked about 11 years old. Yet he manages to gain entry to an adult club by claiming to be 16. How does a kid who looks 11 get past a London bouncer?
This introduces a uniquely British cultural concept called front.
Front.
Yes, it's pure, audacious bluffing. It's walking into a room you have no business being in and acting like you own the place.
Just sheer confidence.
But confidence alone doesn't make you taller. They would have looked at him and laughed if it weren't for the clothes.
Right. The source says he relied on having all the right clothes and what he called the equipment to look grown up.
The equipment, meaning the tailored suits.
He used those tailoring skills we just talked about, and he wasn't doing this alone.
No, he had a partner in crime.
Back in 1959, he had befriended a 12-year-old named Mark Feld.
And for you listening who know your music history, Mark Feld later changes his name.
Yes, he becomes the legendary glam rock icon Marc Bolan, the frontman of T-Rex.
Which is just a crazy historical collision.
It really is. Both of these boys were extremely small for their age, but they gained admission to these exclusive adult clubs using this front and their nice clothes.
But the question is, how do two poor kids get adult mod suits?
Exactly. If we connect this to the bigger picture, we are looking at the very mechanics of youth gatekeeping and subversion.
Right. To answer your question, they couldn't afford Italian-cut mod suits.
So what do?
They went to the children's department of high street budget shops like Woolworths and C&A.
They bought cheap kids' clothes.
They bought cheap kids' blazers and trousers. Then Dexter would take them home, rip the seams apart, and use his dressmaking skills to alter them.
Wow.
He would take in the lapels, change the buttons, adjust the darts, and taper the trousers to mimic expensive, bespoke adult fashion.
Here's where it gets really interesting. You have these two working-class kids altering cheap Woolworth clothes on a bedroom floor, and they are about to go out and dictate British music and fashion for a generation.
It's amazing.
Marc Bolan becomes a rock god, and Dexter shapes the entire DJ scene. It's total resourcefulness. It almost feels like the DIY ethos of the punk movement. But this is 1961, a decade and a half before punk existed.
It absolutely predates the punk ethos of DIY, but with a completely different aesthetic goal.
Right, punk was messy.
Punk in the late 70s was about deconstructing the garment to show your anger safety pins, ripped fabric, chaos.
And what were Dexter and Bolan doing?
Their mod ethos was about hyperconstruction. It was about making the cheap look incredibly expensive and flawless.
Cool move.
For the listener, we should clarify what a mod actually was.
Good point.
Short for modernist, it was a subculture obsessed with sharp, Italian-inspired fashion, modern jazz, and later American R&B and soul music.
It was a suit of armor against the dreary reality of post-war Britain.
Exactly. They were aspiring upward, visually, while subverting the economic barriers that kept them down.
So they put on their counterfeit adult suits, they channel this incredible front, and they march into the Lyceum.
And the Lyceum represents the adult world.
It represents establishment, commerce, and maturity. And Dexter just walks right in.
Unbelievable.
While he's there, he meets a DJ named Ian Samwell, and they become firm friends, which becomes very important later.
Yes, keep Ian Samwell in mind.
But the clothes only got him through the door. It's what he does on the dance floor that completely alters the trajectory of his life.
This is where things get wild.
Which brings us to the great moral panic of September 1961.
Yes, the collision of youth culture and establishment panic.
So Dexter is inside the Lyceum wearing his tailored kid suit, and he gets banned from the club.
Kicked out.
Why? For dancing the twist, which had just arrived in England from America.
Fresh across the Atlantic.
According to Dexter, the management at the Lyceum deemed the dance obscene.
Obscene.
Let me get this timeline straight from the source, because sounds insane. He gets banned.
Right.
Then 2 weeks later, he manages to talk his way back in by promising not to do the dance.
Using that front again.
Then 2 weeks after that, the Lyceum officially hosts the Arthur Murray School of Dancing. to demonstrate the twist.
You can't make it up.
The exact same dance they just called obscene a month prior.
We have to unpack the rapid life cycle of this cultural moral panic because it perfectly illustrates the tension between generational fear and commercial opportunity.
Yeah, let's look at the history of the twist itself. Why was it considered obscene? Because it wasn't a traditional ballroom dance.
Exactly. Prior to this, formal dancing was an open couple dance where you held your partner.
You followed steps.
You followed steps. The twist was revolutionary because you didn't hold your partner, you danced apart, and the primary movement was in the hips and the pelvis.
Ah, the pelvis.
It has its roots in African-American dance styles, and when it hit white mainstream audiences in America and then Britain, it terrified the older generation.
I can imagine.
To the management running the Lyceum, this lack of physical contact combined with pelvic motion was deeply threatening.
It was unsupervised, highly sexualized individualism on the dance floor.
Exactly. So it is immediately labeled obscene when performed organically by a working-class teenager.
But then a month later, they are hosting classes for it.
Notice the mechanics of how it becomes acceptable.
How does that happen?
The Arthur Murray School of Dancing was a massive, sanitized corporate franchise.
Very safe.
Very safe. They took dances, codified them, and sold them to the white, middle, and upper classes.
Once a formalized corporate entity codifies the dance, it suddenly becomes acceptable.
It shifts from being a dangerous organic youth expression to a monetizable product.
The Lyceum management weren't moral Puritans.
They were capitalists. They realized they couldn't stop the trend, so they decided to sell it.
That hypocrisy is just wild. They ban him for being a teenager doing a new dance, but the second it's a class they can charge admission for, it's totally fine.
Classic establishment move.
But during all this back and forth, something massive happens to Dexter.
A huge break.
His incredible dancing was captured on film and included in pave newsreels, which were shown in cinemas all across the country.
We need to explain the sheer cultural monopoly of the pave newsreel for modern listeners.
Yeah, put that in perspective for us.
Today, if you do a dance, you put it on TikTok, and maybe you go viral.
Sure.
In 1961, television ownership in the UK was growing, but it wasn't universal, and the news was incredibly dry.
Right, very formal.
If you wanted to see high-quality, moving images of current events, culture, or sports, you went to the cinema. Before the main feature played, everyone watched the pave newsreels.
So it was a captive audience.
Exactly. So when Jeff Dexter's dancing was featured, it wasn't just a niche audience seeing it. Literally everyone sitting in a cinema across Britain waiting for their movie to start saw his face.
He achieved a level of instant, unavoidable micro-celebrity that is hard to replicate today.
He went pre-digital viral.
And that fame is what forces the Lyceum's hand. They realize people want to see the kid from the cinema screen in real life.
Capitalizing on the hype.
So they just throw their age rules out the window and put him on the payroll to dance in an adult club. And Dexter's reaction to this is amazing.
What did he do?
The source says he dropped his tailoring and music studies entirely, stating, "The thought of being paid to dance with women was just phenomenal."
It's the ultimate teenage dream realized through sheer hustle. He took a moral panic, rode the wave of media exposure, and turned it into a paying career before he was old enough to legally buy a drink.
He completely outmaneuvered the adult establishment.
He really did.
I just can't get over the mental image of this. He goes from sneaking in with a fake suit to literally being on the payroll, and he drops out of school to do it.
But he doesn't just rest on his laurels as a dancer.
No, he doesn't. He starts paying close attention to the broader scene in London.
He's always watching.
The source notes that Dexter observed the strong influence of French-run clubs in 1960s London places like La Discothèque and La Poubelle.
Right.
He actually suggests La Poubelle might have been London's very first discotheque. He recalls that the French became completely obsessed with the twist, so much so that the dance even became known around town as the French twist.
This highlights the incredible cross-pollination of European youth culture happening in Soho and the West End at the time.
London in the early 60s wasn't operating in a vacuum.
Not at all. You had these French-run clubs introducing the concept of the discothèque. For listeners, the word discothèque literally means record library in French.
A library of records.
It's a revolutionary concept. A venue strictly for playing records over a sound system rather than hosting live bands.
Was that unusual at the time? I feel like we take it for granted that a club just plays records.
It was highly unusual. Before this, if you went out dancing, you danced to a live jazz band, a skiffle group, or a rock and roll combo.
Playing recorded music was seen as cheap, maybe.
Yeah, or something you did in a coffee bar with a jukebox, not a dedicated nightlife venue. The French brought a more continental, sophisticated approach to nightlife that deeply appealed to the mod sensibility.
Because the mods were always looking toward Europe, right?
Specifically Italy for the scooters and the suits, and France for the cinema and the nightlife vibe. They were looking for style cues.
They wanted to escape the British grayness.
Exactly. So the fact that the dance was rebranded the French twist shows how cultural cachet was imported. It sounded more exotic.
And Dexter sees this happening and immediately acts on it. In early 1962, he capitalizes on this massive trend.
It makes his move.
He teams up with his friend from the Lyceum, DJ Ian Samwell, who we mentioned earlier.
There he is.
Right. Samwell writes a song, and Dexter makes a record called Let Me Teach You How to Dance and Twist In like the French kids do.
The timeline of his rapid evolution here is what is truly staggering.
Let's map it out.
Think about the progression. In 1955, he is buying his first 78 RPM record without a player.
By August 1961, he is a 14-year-old sneaking into clubs in altered kids' clothing.
By September 1961, he is a paid, famous dancer causing a moral panic.
And by early 1962, he is in a studio recording his own track, capitalizing on a dance craze he helped popularize.
In basically one calendar year, he transitions from a consumer trying to sneak through the door to the talent on the floor to a creator pressing his own vinyl.
It's an acceleration that speaks to his intense networking skills and his finger on the pulse of what the youth actually wanted.
He didn't just participate in the trends, he actively sought to monetize and lead them.
He was a 15-year-old cultural entrepreneur, which perfectly transitions into the next major phase of his life, moving behind the decks.
The DJ years.
Dexter eventually transitioned from being the dancer on the floor to being the one spinning the records in the booth.
Right.
Our source tells us he became the resident DJ at a legendary club called Middle Earth in Covent Garden.
A massive venue.
And he's working right alongside the iconic broadcaster John Peel.
That is a huge validation of his taste.
The source also notes that Middle Earth was actually a bigger club than the UFO Club in Tottenham Court Road, which is wild because UFO is legendary in its own right as the epicenter of the underground.
And Dexter was the resident DJ there as well.
He was everywhere.
This raises an important question regarding the cultural landscape of the era, and it's one we need to explore deeply.
Was that?
What exactly was the role of the DJ in the 1960s underground?
Because it wasn't what we think of today, right? He wasn't standing on a massive festival stage with lasers, seamlessly beat-matching house tracks.
Exactly. Today, the DJ is often the primary producer and the focal point of the event. In the mid to late 60s, at places like UFO and Middle Earth, DJing was an entirely different art form.
What were they doing then?
They weren't necessarily mixing seamlessly from one track to another. The equipment barely allowed for it.
Right. No sync buttons.
They were tastemakers. They were the curators of the counterculture.
We have to look at the transition happening in London at this time.
From mod to psychedelic.
The sharp amphetamine-fueled mod scene of the early 60s was giving way to the sprawling, acid-drenched psychedelic scene of the late 60s.
And UFO and Middle Earth were the headquarters for that shift. Pink Floyd was playing there, Soft Machine.
It was a complete sensory overload with light shows and avant-garde art.
So where does the DJ fit into that chaos? If you were the resident DJ at those clubs during this transition, you were the person introducing the latest, strangest, most mind-expanding sounds from America and Europe to the British underground.
You were setting the tone.
You might play a heavy blues track, followed by a 15-minute sitar raga, followed by a spoken word poetry record.
Just taking people on a trip.
You were curating the vibe of cultural revolution. You were trusted to guide the audience through an experience.
And the fact that he was working alongside John Peel is a massive detail. John Peel is basically the godfather of discovering new underground music in the UK for decades on the BBC.
Everyone wanted a Peel session.
Exactly. To be his peer at Middle Earth shows the immense level of respect Dexter had cultivated. He went from a kid in a tailored Woolworths jacket to the guy dictating the playlist for the absolute epicenter of the London underground.
And if we trace the geography of his rise, it tells its own story of social mobility.
From South London up.
He starts in the working class, heavily bombed out post-war streets of Elephant and Castle.
Through clothes, front, and dancing, he infiltrates the glittering commercial West End at the Lyceum.
Then he moves laterally to become the resident tastemaker of the bohemian psychedelic underground in Covent Garden and Tottenham Court Road.
He is charting a physical and cultural map across London which leads us to the ultimate destination on that map.
The big one.
The source states that this journey behind the turntables culminated when he DJ'd at the 1971 Glastonbury Fair.
Now, we have to clarify this for the listener.
Yes, please do, because modern Glastonbury is a corporate behemoth with 200,000 people, VIP yurts, and televised sets.
The 1971 Glastonbury Fair was the direct precursor to that, but it was a completely different animal.
How so?
The contrast is vital. The 1971 Glastonbury Fair, organized by Michael Eavis, Andrew Kerr, and Arabella Churchill, was the absolute pinnacle of the British countercultural gathering.
It was free.
It was largely a free festival. It was conceived almost as a spiritual antidote to the heavy commercialization of other rock festivals like the Isle of Wight.
It was much smaller.
There were maybe 12,000 people there. It was famous for offering free milk from the farm to the attendees.
And the stage.
They built the very first pyramid stage out of scaffolding and plastic sheeting, specifically positioning it on what they believed was a ley line.
And Jeff Dexter is there, spinning records. Imagine the scene. David Bowie is playing at 4 in the morning as the sun comes up.
The vibe is incredibly raw and rural.
And Dexter is the musical glue holding the spaces between the bands together. He didn't just move through these scenes, he anchored them.
He provided the soundtrack to the shifting generational consciousness.
And it represents a complete evolution from his origins.
Think about it. He started by carrying a 78 RPM record through the concrete streets of South London just to find a machine to play it on.
16 years later, he is standing in a field in Somerset, commanding a sound system for 12,000 people at the dawn of the modern festival era.
He has become the machine.
It's an incredible arc. And just when you think he's reached the absolute peak as a tastemaker at the first Glastonbury, he pivots again.
Another reinvention.
He completely shifts his role and shapes the global industry from a totally different angle. The source tells us that in 1970, Dexter moved into music management.
He took on a band named, rather appropriately, America.
This is a fascinating pivot. Let's look at the band America. They were an American folk rock band, but ironically, they formed in London.
Right. The members were Jerry Beckley, Dewey Bunnell, and Dan Peake.
They were actually the sons of U.S. Air Force personnel stationed at the RAF West Ruislip base near London.
So you have these American military brats living in London playing acoustic folk rock, and Jeff Dexter, the ultimate London mod turned psychedelic DJ, becomes their manager.
It seems like an odd pairing on paper. How did he actually impact them?
The source is quite clear on his impact. Dexter didn't just manage them in a passive administrative sense.
He wasn't just doing the paperwork.
He was heavily involved in their creative genesis. He co-produced their self-titled first album, and he booked their very first gig.
Where did they play?
They played at an event called Implosion at the Roundhouse, which Dexter was heavily involved in running.
And that album, under his guidance, achieved massive global success, including their huge 1972 #1 hit, A Horse with No Name.
That song is iconic.
It's a staple of classic rock radio to this day. But I want to dig into how he did it. How does a DJ step into a studio and produce a platinum-selling acoustic folk album?
This is the ultimate culmination of Jeff Dexter's entire skill set. The kid who used front to talk his way past the bouncers at the Lyceum used that exact same networking prowess and audacity to launch a global phenomenon.
Because being a manager requires hustle.
It requires an innate understanding of what the public wants, and it requires knowing every promoter and venue owner in the scene. Dexter had been training for that since he was 14 years old, hustling his way into clubs.
And the production side, translating DJ skills into studio skills.
That is the most crucial connection. Producing a record is essentially an extension of DJing.
Tell me more about that.
What does a great DJ do? They spend hours reading a room, understanding the psychological flow of a song, knowing exactly when a beat should drop or a chorus should swell to make a crowd react.
They understand the architecture of a hit.
Exactly. Dexter applied the taste-making skills he honed night after night at Middle-earth and UFO to the studio.
He recognized that the heavy acid rock sound of the late 60s was giving way to a softer, more introspective, harmony-driven acoustic sound in the early 70s.
Artists like Crosby, Stills, and Nash or James Taylor were rising. He helped shape America's sound to perfectly meet that incoming cultural wave.
He curated their sound for a global audience, just like he curated a playlist for a club.
Precisely.
So what does this all mean? When we zoom out and look at this entire journey, it's just astonishing.
It really is.
For you listening, I want you to think about the complete life cycle in the music business we just traced over the last hour. He started as a pure fan, a 10-year-old kid literally carrying a record through the streets because he didn't own a player.
He became a dancer, serving as the physical, visual representation of the music.
He became a DJ, stepping up as the curator and tastemaker of the music.
He became a recording artist in 1962, creating the music.
And finally, he became a producer and a manager, directing the actual business and sonic architecture of the music.
He experienced and mastered every single facet of the industry, and it was all driven by this relentless, working-class resourcefulness.
His profound lesson in cultural agency. He never waited for permission.
He didn't have the luxury of waiting.
Exactly. Whether it's meticulously altering a cheap child's jacket from Woolworth to look like high fashion, or using the controversy of a banned dance to get a paid gig at a club he was previously too young to enter.
Jeff Dexter's story is fundamentally about refusing to accept the barriers placed in front of you.
He hacked the social and cultural hierarchy of his time at every single turn.
And that leaves us with a compelling final thought.
Let's hear it.
If a 14-year-old kid altering children's clothing on a bedroom floor and dancing in a London club could quietly set the stage for modern DJ culture and eventually produce global hit records, it makes you wonder about today.
What's happening right now?
What seemingly trivial, misunderstood youth trends are happening right now in the obscure corners of the internet or in tiny, unglamorous underground clubs?
Right.
What moral panic is currently unfolding that is actively, quietly writing the cultural history of tomorrow?
That is such a great thought to end on. The next massive cultural shift is probably happening right now, being led by a teenager who just figured out how to bypass the gatekeepers.
Absolutely.
Thank you for joining us on this deep dive into the extraordinary life of Jeff Dexter. We hope you learned something new, gained a new perspective on the music you listen to, and found a bit of inspiration in his incredible hustle. We will catch you on the next deep dive.